Welcome into our overtime segment here at SportsSource.tv. We tape this after our show on Sunday mornings. You're watching it whenever you want to be watching it, anytime, so happy day to you, whatever today is. I'm John Pennington, joined by Chuck Cavaleras, Josh Ward, Ryan Callahan. This segment brought to you by our friends at Blue Smoke Cigar. A membership at the top club in town, top cigar lounge in town, gets you your own personal locker, which you can keep cigars in there, you can keep your booze in there, you can keep well, you can keep anything there. If you really want to risk it, you can keep all your life savings in there. I don't know that it's like a bank, but hey, it is a personal locker. 15% off Blue Smoke's elite selection of fine cigars. 10% off at McScrooge's Wine and Liquor. Access to the HD TVs they got all over the place. You get access to the lounge area, to the card tables, to the golf simulators, and much, much more. Blue Smoke Cigar. If you enjoy a cigar, do me a favor, go see for yourself. Go check it out. Talk to Mike Hicks and the gang. Blue Smoke Cigar. You will be very happy that you did. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about where Tennessee's place is in the SEC East. You just finished signing day, so let's start there, but let's also include some records. All right, so let's take a look at these numbers. On your left, and Ryan, since you're with GoVols 24/7, I'm using the 24/7 Sports Recruiting rankings there from this week. In the East, Georgia was first, Florida 14th nationally, South Carolina 19th, Tennessee middle of the East at 20th, Kentucky 38th, Missouri 41st, Vanderbilt 42nd. Next column is their 2017 overall record and their 2017 SEC record. You see Tennessee with that horrific 0-8. But the more telling number is over on the far right. And again, the teams are listed in order of this week's recruiting rankings. But you see there, Georgia has been the best since Missouri joined the league. And I wanted to see, this goes back to Missouri joining, so it's all an even kind of a playing field here. Since 2012, when Missouri came in, Georgia is the best in the East, 34-14. Florida, second best, 30-18. Third best in the SEC, South Carolina, 24-24. Fourth best in the SEC East, Missouri, 23-25. You are tied for fifth place in the SEC East with Vanderbilt. Yeah. You have an identical 15-33 record with Vanderbilt, and you're only ahead of, over that time period, Kentucky, and they've actually gotten a little bit better the last couple of years. 4 games better than you in the SEC record this past year. They went 500, and you were 0-for. All right, so you are down the pecking order. It's time, and we've talked about this before, it's time for people to stop thinking of South Carolina as, well, they're one of the dregs.
No,
Going
sir.
by this, you are the dregs. You have to jump Missouri, you have to jump South Carolina. If it's based on last year, you got to jump Kentucky. Vanderbilt is even with you. So now you look at that recruiting that you did this year, this signing class. Tell me where this program is in the East looking forward, meaning 2018 and beyond. And you can break those up at 2. You could do it as one answer, whatever. Chuck, I'll start with you. Tennessee in the SEC East, when you look at that recruiting class, solid. But to get out of that hole, you're either going to have to coach them way up or you're going to have to fix that recruiting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it has to be one of the two. I think you're last in your division. You know, when you look at it, and here was another stat that a lot of people don't want to hear. Think about everybody in the SEC the most recent time you played them. You lost. Yeah. You're not 1-0 against anybody in the SEC. So to me, you're below Vanderbilt. They've beaten you, what, 4 out of the last 6? So you can't say that. Kentucky's beaten you the last time you played them. I see you as being last in the division and no better than maybe next to the last in the SEC. You got a lot of ground to make up.
How long does that take?
I would say you're looking at least 2 years to be middle of the pack.
All right, Josh Ryan, your thoughts on where Tennessee is in terms of that current standing and where they're going?
Yeah, I would put probably Tennessee a couple spots higher than Chuck just from a standing standpoint, but I can't really argue against 2-4 in the last 6 games against Vanderbilt. Those numbers are real, and the records are very real. I still think from a selling standpoint on the recruiting trail, Tennessee does offer more, but so the answer, where would I put Tennessee? Probably 4th in the division, and you're close with South Carolina, but Georgia right now would be on top, having just won an SEC title and what it's doing in recruiting. Florida's probably higher up, and South Carolina, the numbers are better, and they've been better against you with Will Muschamp. And as much as people kind of rag on Will Muschamp, He's done well against Tennessee.
He's never lost to Tennessee.
Yeah, and he just out-recruited you.
Yeah,
I mean,
he just went 9-4 at South Carolina. Right. I think he's ahead of what the expected pace was for him in Columbia. Now, what is the ceiling for South Carolina? That's a fair question, but people are asking that as it relates to Tennessee too.
Yeah, not only is Tennessee toward the bottom of the division right now, they're toward the bottom of a weak SEC East, as we continue to point out. And this shows it. South Carolina, third best record in the division, and they're 500 in the SEC. So only 2 teams above 500, and you're still toward the bottom. That's how rough it's been. But I think they're somewhere close to the middle of the pack. I would put them 4th or 5th going into this year. And I think a solid, typical year that you could expect from Jeremy Pruitt, 6 and 6 or so, puts you, maybe battling for 4th. And I think by year 2, under Jeremy Pruitt, Tennessee could be competing for 3rd in the East. So I don't think they're that far off. The problem is the gap between Georgia and everyone else seems to be getting bigger. And this recruiting class did nothing to change that. Georgia 1st, Florida 14th, and everybody else below that.
Well, in Georgia's class,
so good,
historic.
Yeah.
I mean, there were debates that it could be the greatest class ever, which that's kind of hard to judge. They only did this recruiting ranking stuff for 25 years or so, but also nobody knows how these guys are going to sign out. But sufficient to say, if you're being talked about as perhaps the greatest class ever, I think that tells you pretty good class.
Yeah, and just about everybody in the country would trade their class for Georgia's.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I promise you that.
So when you look at it overall, I think you're right. I think from a national brand standpoint, Tennessee is still above a South Carolina, Kentucky, or Vanderbilt. But I'm with Chuck. I think in reality, the East is down. There's no question. The East is not as strong as the West. However, it has become a lot more bunched. To whereas if you go back to the 90s, it was you and Florida. So you had to jump Florida, and you jumped them twice. The rest of the time, Florida owned the division. But you had to jump Florida. Now, again, you've got it may not be one team that's way up here, but you got 4 or 5 teams that are still ahead of you, even if it's just barely ahead of you, when you're talking about actual on-field product. There are a lot of folks that are saying right now that Georgia's lost everybody. The East is wide open. Your thoughts, considering, go back to what we said in the show, Jeremy Pruitt talking about the roster, going to have 75 to 77 scholarships. Right now, I think they're at 80. So he's seeing more departures than, there's still a possibility other guys could come in, but he's seeing it as you'll still have more people go. So if you're 8 to 10 people below the scholarship limit, okay, now you're really in trouble if you can't fix the injury bug. And if he's talking about it being a small football team, well, part of that's got to be fixed by recruiting bigger guys. You got a weight room, but if you got guys on small frames, there's only so much you can do to build them up. This talk of Tennessee's going to have a quick turnaround, I do not see it being quick this year.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think Jeremy Pruitt looks at it the same way Butch Jones did 5 years ago, for that matter, and that he feels he has to turn over this roster as quickly as possible. I think he knows there's some talent there in spots, but I don't think he comes in feeling like this is a job where he can make a quick turnaround and be competing for the SEC East in year 2. So I think the goal is gradually get there, have a mostly new roster by year 3, and hope that you're ready to compete for at least second in the division by then, and be ready to challenge for a pretty good bowl game, and then hope that Georgia somehow falls back to the pack and makes your job a little bit easier at some point.
Yeah, and on the field this year, I think everybody would agree that the gap between Georgia and Tennessee was pretty wide. Well, it was widened on signing day with this recruiting class. So I think with all the different players that Georgia's bringing in, they have to replace Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb and Lorenzo Carter, Davin Bellamy, those guys that came back, and that was a big deal for them. They have to replace some key players, but they add Justin Fields to that competition at quarterback at Georgia. They add some linemen. Cade Mays, who would have been Tennessee's highest-rated player, he goes to Georgia. He's kind of just a throw-in to the group of 5 stars that they signed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's no quick fix for this. This has been a gradual thing, and I use the analogy a lot of times in baseball. When you're in a pennant race and you've got like 4 or 5 teams you got to pass to get up there, it's tough to do. All of a sudden, those games that you're losing, I mean, whatever it is, you haven't been able to put away Florida when Florida was down. What's going to change about that? Georgia just seems to plug some other people in there. Yeah, they've lost a lot of players, but they also had a lot of depth at running back. So, I mean, I see it as looking, that was really, I think, was one of the big downfalls for Butch Jones. The division was down, and he wasn't able to take advantage of the opportunity to get to the SEC championship game.
And everyone's assuming that Jeremy Pruitt in this class, and we had fun at the end of the show a couple weeks ago, everybody's assuming that this coaching staff is going to be miles better than the last coaching staff. And I'm well and good with that. I think it would be. I think it will be. However, I also remember everyone celebrating Dave Clawson, Bob Shoop. Those didn't turn out so well.
Sal Sinceri looked like a good hire.
Sal
at the time.
Sinceri coming from
To some
Alabama.
people.
Well, I mean, still coming from Alabama. I've seen it not work before. I also know a lot of people were thinking signing day. Well, look at this group of recruiters. Look at the people we're talking to. Signing day is going to be glorious, and it wasn't. Not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but I do think I needed Butch Jones to prove something to me, and there are people who got mad at this because you said, look, 9-4 isn't bad. When you took it over at 5, then you went to 7, then you went to 9, and you're in the top 25, that's not terrible. He showed me he was building. I'll give you credit for building. This guy's going to have to prove it to me before I'm going, oh, well, they'll be much better because he's there. Look, it's his first year. Kirby Smart wasn't as good his first year at Georgia as he was his second year. There's time management stuff.
Right.
We talked about it earlier. Ty Hilton's got a huge salary for a guy who's never called plays. Kevin Shearer's called plays once before in his career for a year at South Alabama on the defensive side. I'm just not all in I think the coaching staff's good. I love the look of it on paper. I don't think year one, though, is going to be some rush to glory.
Well, and I think 2019 is going to be a big recruiting year for Tennessee, but let's still see if that turns out to be true, because I think Georgia's still going to do well. I think Florida's probably going to do well in recruiting. I think Willie Taggart's going to do well at Florida State. I think Jimbo Fisher's going to do well at Texas A&M. Ohio State's going to be fine. You know how many spots are in the top 5? 5. Well, I just ran through more than 5 schools.
That's why they
very
call it
quickly.
the top 5.
So there are a lot of schools that are very
Well,
confident that they're going to recruit very well, and they're probably in better positions than Tennessee. Again, I think Tennessee's going to do well in recruiting, but time will still tell.
And here's I think the one thing they can look at that you can address, and you can see if you can do something to help make it better. Why were there so many injuries at Tennessee? Was it either something in the nutrition? Was it something in the strength and conditioning? Was it your practice? It wasn't just a freak thing anymore. You have to be able to try and put your finger on something that they were doing wrong that they can do better.
I think some of it was freak, though.
But I agree, some of it.
Some of it's freakish. I think he's probably right. You're smaller. I mean, you go back the year they made the change with the strength conditioning coach, and you go out against Appalachian State and you're pushed around. Your line is pushed around by Appalachian State.
That
Okay,
told
that
you
was the
something.
first. Well, we're taped here. We're online here. That was the first holy shit moment. All right. So I think that you have to fix the size, and I don't think you can just
Wave the magic wand.
exactly. You can't just take a guy. If you recruited somebody that's not big, it's hard to say. Now we're going to make you a 300-pound man. There is no Captain America serum. I want to finish with this. You look at. I think someone was knocking something down to make me change my graphic here on the desk, so thanks to Paul. Look at that, graphic correct. Didn't go to screensaver. But you think about Jeremy Pruitt. How much would you love, I'll keep it with the superhero thing, how much would you love to get the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around him, or give him a truth serum and say, okay, you've been at Florida State, Georgia, Alabama. You've won national titles. You know what it takes. Now give me your honest take of this roster. Wouldn't you love to get an honest answer from him? And I think he's hinted at it.
Yeah.
He hasn't been spinning it, but I would love to, meet him at Calhoun's, have a couple of drinks, and him say, now here's what I really think.
Yeah.
I would love to know, because my guess is he walked in here and went, "Eee."
Yeah, and also he scouted and coached against this team last year, and I think he knows what he's coming into based on that. And I think just based on what I've heard, they looked at Tennessee this past season and thought that wasn't a team on paper that should have been 8-4 or anything like that. That team got to 4-8 not by accident. So I think clearly Jeremy Pruitt sees some deficiencies at the very least in this roster, and that's why I say I think he looks at it as a situation where he has to flip this roster within 3 years if possible.
Yeah, Jeremy Pruitt's going to express confidence in his players because they're his players like he did with the cornerback position. But earlier this week, but I have no doubt that if he could make big changes very quickly with the roster, that he would. Because otherwise, he knows it's going to take a good amount of time to get it where it needs to be to compete with the schools he's coached for the last few years.
His words toward the quarterbacks were very supportive. His actions, where he went out and talked to 5? He was trying to get, okay.
Yeah, there's a reason
The
he
actions
offered
were different.
he offered so many cornerbacks back in December and in January and brought them to campus.
Exactly. All right. Chuck Cavaleris, Josh Ward, Ryan Callahan, thank you all for being here today and sticking around with us to do the overtime segment. We appreciate you for joining us here. Go back and watch segment 6 online here. if you're in town, we need for you to come join us at Calhoun's on February 21st. We got a big charity event coming up down there. Well, I don't know how big it's going to be. It depends on you. Limited seats. Only going to have about 100 people, but it's a charity. You've got appetizers there, but it's your chance to come down, meet the guys from the show, but especially a bunch of our VFLs will be there, and it's your chance to sit there and ask them questions. And we got guys who were there lived through the Majors Fulmer turnover. Lamarcus Thompson played under Fulmer, Dooley, and Kiffin. There's a lot of stuff to ask these guys. Not to mention, there's no cameras, so they're going to give you some unfiltered, probably holy shit comments. So join us. Go check out segment 6, learn more, or just email me at john@MrSEC, and I'll tell you more about it. We appreciate you for watching every week. I really do. And thanks for supporting our sponsors. We'll see you next Sunday at 11 on WATE 6.